What's up, guys? Luke here from Spotlight on Spurs, back again for yet another My Spurs preview. This time we have the brilliant Sean on from Spurs Talk Show. How are we doing?
Good, mate. Yeah, good. I'm a little bit frustrated with the window and stuff, but I'm not going into meltdown mode after what happened. I don't know if we're sort of giving the game away when the record is here, but after what happened yesterday, I think the world is the Tottenham fans are in absolute meltdown. Nothing like a good old fashioned meltdown, eh, Lukey? You know,
We
I'm not
do it
into
better than most. We do it better than most, this meltdown malarkey, that's for sure. These have been really, really interesting because I've spread them out over a couple of weeks. Like the first guest that come on, it was very much like Kudus has just been signed. Morgan Gibbs-White was here we go, and it was all waiting. Then after a couple, it was kind of like, this has gone on a little bit long now. Like, what's going on? Then it went to right. That's completely dropped out. We've won a few friendlies. So it's been really interesting to see the different theme of whether people are happy or not. So be interesting to see when we get to the finished article of all of the ones where we're kind of at. But yeah, so we're recording this just after the Bayern game. Bayern we played the game yesterday. Obviously didn't go too well, as you've already alluded to. Fan base is in absolute meltdown, considering it's one loss in the first preseason loss of Frank's reign, and people are already calling for him to lose his job. Absolutely craziness. But we will get into that, I'm sure. We'll start with the first question. Just a little bit of your thoughts on last season, and then we'll kind of go into this season and etc. So what were your thoughts?
Look, I mean, to be entirely honest, mate, I hated it. I hated last season. I've always said that for me, football, going to the games like I do, or I'm a season ticket holder, I try to get to about 10, 15% of away games if I can get tickets. They're difficult to get hold of. So when you travel a lot, like to me, football is like an escape from the stresses of your life, right? Like, so, you work hard a week and then you want to go and chill out and then just sort of put your hopes and expectations into something that you have no sort of direct control over, but you're passionate about and you've got your kind of your investment in. But on that basis, like for me, a season that has 22 league losses, even if it leads to a trophy at the end, don't get me wrong, the last few weeks of the season were spectacular in those moments, but you had to suffer 8 months of just horrendous outcomes and exhausting trips and just being deflated and frustrated and angry and all of the things that come with it as someone who puts content out, all of the kind of, the various arguments you have with people about why, on what sort of scale, how bad are we? And so, yeah, I'm not going to remember the season probably in the same way as other people do, because to a lot of Tottenham fans, a lot of fans in football, it's all about trophies and that's all that matters. And so lifting that trophy kind of rights all the wrongs of what happened before. It's just not the way I see it. Like, it's not my trophy. I don't get to lift it. I'm an irrelevant observer of other people's success or failures in that regard. And so to me, I want to be a part of the journey, and the journey does matter. And so, look, don't get me wrong, we starved of success at Tottenham, and it was incredible. Being in Bilbao was incredible. Going to, Bodo, I loved Bodo. That was the most fun day I've ever had, getting up at 2:00 in the morning, not getting back until 4 p.m. with Henry and Johnny. Like, just absolute incredible memories that I'll take with me. And so, like, there's bits of the season like that I'll never forget that, and that was incredible. But for the most part, the season overall was torture. And so, I almost feel like my memory is going to be like, I remember 24-25, we won a trophy and it was amazing, but there's a massive indelible asterisk that's attached to that sort of that memory, because I'll never forget the 22 league losses. I'll never forget all of the double talk of our manager, Ange, who got it done in the end, but he wants everyone to remember the fact that he told them and they didn't listen. Oh, I told them. But yeah, you also said 1,000 other things that you don't want to talk about now, because you end up that was all bozo behavior, So I don't know. I just think for me, I thought last season was incredibly unique. I don't think any team has ever lifted a trophy and then had 22 losses in the league. I don't think any team has had 22 losses and stayed up before. Yeah. So, like, it was very much yin and yang. And depending on what your priority is, you might feel very differently to me. But me personally, I think that the Premier League is important. And I think it was a really frustrating and just a difficult season to endure for 8 months of it. The final month was great, but the 8 that went before was hard work.
Yeah, 100%. And as I say, as a match going fan, the experience of a match is completely different to people that don't go to matches. So, I mean, Spurs lose, it makes me miserable. It does annoy me. But the facts is that I sat on my sofa, I turned the TV on, I watched the game, and then I went about my business when it ended. Whereas for match going fans, whether it be home or away, there's a travel to, there's a travel from, you're around other people that have done that same journey. So I can imagine it being a completely different experience for sure.
I certainly wouldn't say it's like, because I think people take that narrative like, oh, when you go to the games, it's more unacceptable than it is if you don't. Like, I'm not saying that at all. Like, I think you used the words correctly. It's a different experience. There's loads of fans out there that are probably more passionate about Tottenham than I am. They just don't have the ability to get to the games either because of their geography, their resources, their family, their time, whatever. And so, there's no direct correlation, I don't think, between your access to the tickets versus your passion for the football club. And there's a load of people out there that I'm sure live in areas that just couldn't get to the game that are more upset than I am when Tottenham lose, or more happy than I am when Tottenham win, and vice versa. So it's just a different experience. And when you factor in the effort, the travel, it's exhausting, that additional cost, all of those things are just added variables into the energy. But at the same time, I think you shake hands with that when you decide to become a season ticket holder, right? That's like, you're buying in for that. And again, not to get off the topic, but when people say, our lack of trophies are unacceptable. If we have to play at that certain pecking order, if we have to be that team that's not quite as good as the rest, and we shouldn't be paying for the prices of the tickets that we pay for. Again, I don't really subscribe to that notion. I think that the ticket price is set fundamentally on other things rather than just expectations of success. If it was that easy that, only if you charge £200, then you should be guaranteed a trophy, or charge £50, then you can, tolerate no trophies, then everybody would, price their tickets accordingly. But I don't think it's not about that. I think that part of the fun of going to the stadium and watching a live sport event is the jeopardy of not knowing if you're going to win or lose.
Yep.
And the price is set by the demand for the tickets, and obviously the stadium, the environment, the various other things that are sort of setting up those costs. So I just think that like the experience at the stadium is 100% part of the risk of not knowing whether you're going to win or lose. You should shake hands with that stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, some would argue that last year we knew what we was going to get. We knew we was going to lose, but yeah, I completely understand what you mean and agree with you on that. Moving on to the next part is Thomas Frank's appointment. Obviously, it seems amongst the fan base, and there were a few sections that kind of wasn't happy that he was the guy. Now he's in. Again, a lot of people who have come on here have answered that they're sort of happy with it. However, after the loss to Bayern Munich, there'll be some that will be coming on here saying he shouldn't be here, which is ludicrous in my eyes. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on Thomas Frank coming in and being a new Spurs boss?
Yeah, mixed, to be honest, mate. He wasn't really I'll be honest, he wasn't my first choice, second or third or fourth. Like, he was probably somewhere around sort of fifth on my shortlist. By the end, I thought that Ange had to go, even though I appreciate that he got the trophy. And that Thomas Frank is the entire opposite of him in terms of like setting expectations, making bold statements, the energy of the guy. Like, I think Ange is a bigger personality. I think Thomas Frank is a bit more kind of measured and quieter and thoughtful. And so it's a 180 on that. I've got no problem with either particular character style, by the way. But in terms of Thomas Frank, look, I think that he's gonna get us more organized. I actually think that yesterday could have been a blessing in disguise. You learn more from your losses than you do from your successes in life. And I think if Tottenham were to have snuck that game 1-0 on a break or something, then we'd all be super happy. But actually, that might paper over some cracks that exist, and people would be a little bit caught up in some sort of delusion that we're more prepared than we are against that higher caliber team. So Thomas Frank, the fan base will cherry pick their moments of when to melt down about things. A lot of the Ange-ing crowd that still loiter and still won't let that one drop. They're waiting for their moment to hit Thomas Frank with any stick, which I think is a shame. But it is what it is. It goes with the territory of passionate opinions. To me, Thomas Frank, look, I think he's organised. The person that I really am impressed with more than Thomas Frank is actually Cochrane, the assistant manager. I think he's someone that's incredibly diligent. I think he's very proactive. I think he's thoughtful. I think he's quite creative with his tactics, and I can already see little minor tweaks with regards our transfer strategy and the way that we set up in the preseason that I think bodes very well, sorry, for Tottenham's season. Like the set pieces, I think it's clear that the set pieces are becoming a priority. We're trying to do to other teams' goalkeepers what they did to us under Ange, and look, there's lots of other sort of insights and little glimpses of what's to come with time and patience and preparation that I think will really sort of yield those little micro percentage point gains. And in football, sometimes it can be just that little bit that can nick a point here or 3 points there. I think all those little things add up. So I'm impressed with his what I've seen of him so far. Impressed with the whole team's sort of diligence, the reorganization, the structure. Although again yesterday, it looked a little bit like we were picked apart by everyone was a little bit too deep. Not to get into the game specifically, but that did offer a little bit of space above the D for the Bayern Munich, and Bayern Munich figured that out by the second half, right? So Tottenham need to be aware of the sort of credibility of the opposition, of being able to figure out in real time where the sort of gaps and the opportunities are. But generally speaking, yeah, I'm excited to see it. But I think he's the guy that's going to take us to the next level. I don't, but I think he's probably the right guy for right now.
Yeah.
But I think he'll be gone again in 2 years, probably. I don't think he'll be a 7-year guy like he was at Brentford at Tottenham, mate. But Tottenham, if Tottenham want to get to the next level, then I think fundamentally things have to change at the football club. A manager or a coach are not going to change those things. There needs to be a different sort of approach to the ambition. There needs to be the kind of either the moving on of the ownership. Not that I'm leaving out or anything, but just like that kind of they've taken us to a certain level, and it's going to be hard to push through that threshold. So I think Thomas Frank is probably the right guy for right now, but I'm not sitting here like sort of blowing smoke up his ass thinking that he's the real deal or the everything we need thing. So I don't think he is.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think we spoke about this on other shows before, and my ideas align very much with yours in this aspect. In terms of Frank wasn't my number one, he makes sense for a lot of reasons. However, I think that we should be targeting somewhere else after winning Champions League, etc. However, as I said, it does make sense in a lot of things. In terms of like Ange Postecoglou, obviously for me, I was one that was vehemently backing him towards the end of the season. However, I think there's a big difference between thinking he's the man to take us forward and thinking that he deserved to stay the season to see out what could have become, sort of thing. So I wasn't sitting here saying that he should be a 3, 4, 5 year manager. It was that I think that he deserves the backing. And I've also was saying as well that, as you've just said, there's a lot of factors that need to change at this club for anyone to be a success. So if Ange stays or goes, we need better recruitment. Our medical team needs to improve. We need to start looking at a different aspect, looking at not just young players, but experienced players. So if that doesn't change, then nothing's going to change at this club, regardless of how good the manager is. We may go up a couple of places, 100%, but where the fans want to be, a lot of things need to change, not just the manager. And I also think you're right about the staff. It's been quite a long time since we brought in that amount of staff alongside a manager. And within the game, it seems to be that Cochrane is a bigger pull as Frank was in some aspects, because he seems to be really, really highly rated. So completely agree with you on that. You've kind of touched on it. But in terms of what Frank will bring, and this doesn't just mean tactically. I forgot to add as well. I think he was exactly right as well about the Bayern Munich game. I think that I didn't learn anything at Bayern Munich that I didn't learn at Arsenal. It was exactly what I knew in terms of when we come up against the absolute elite, which Elise and Kane showed us yesterday, we were going to struggle, but that's because we're not good enough as a team. Yeah. And also, we are okay defensively. We'll be better than last year. But actually, our attack needs some major, major upgrades. And both of the games, although one was won and one was lost, I still see exactly the same picture. That was exactly what was required, is that it seems to be get it to Kudus and hopefully he delivers. And that seems to be much what we want to do this season. So big changes.
And that leaves a hell of a lot of pressure on him, because... Yes. You're expecting to replace 67 GA at the moment. We haven't, at the time of recording, we haven't got, a replacement for Sonny. We haven't got a placement for Decky or for Madison. And our forward line, our strikers obviously leave a lot to be desired at times as well. And so if he now is going to become the outlet, which it looked like yesterday, that was the only option. I thought he did a really relatively good job, to be honest, trying his hardest in that hard environment. He's going to need help. Otherwise, the expectations on him, he's going to end up coming up short because there's not enough people to sort of share the load. Like with Charlotte, you know how I feel about Richarlison. Like he He can't do it. He can't do that sort of thing. And like I say, that level set against Bayern Munich, it was a wake-up call. I hope that the club take it as the opportunity that it should be seen as a recognition of the gap, the gulf between where we think we could be and then where we need to be if we're going to, because we could get Bayern Munich in the Champions League, right, in a couple of months' time. So, yeah, I just think that it's probably it's kind of good in a way to get your ass handed to you the way we did yesterday, because it just makes everyone go, oh, okay, yeah, we're miles off it still, so we still need a lot of help. Hopefully, the clubs, directors, and technical staff, and all that will sit there and think, yep, okay, we can't scrimp anymore. And we've got PSG coming up in what is it, 5 days time. So at the moment, yeah, unless you get in a really top draw player and also get Solanke back and maybe a couple of others that are sort of on the fringe, then I think that PSG will be a difficult challenge, and that might be a little bit embarrassing as well. And that's a competitive game. Got a decent start in the Premier League, mate. But yeah, like I say, it should be seen as the lesson that it hopefully was.
Yeah. So as I say, we've kind of touched on it, so no need to kind of go into it here. What will Frank bring to Spurs? I think it just solidifies everything at this moment in time. Makes us a bit better defensively. We're less gung ho, a bit more tactical, and I completely agree on the set pieces. If you can get, I think Frank said it, if you can get 1% improvement in any area of the game, we should be looking to do that. And we've been poor at set pieces for quite a while. I know we scored a couple when we had the set piece coach, but it always feels like we get when we get free kick takers like a Maddison but they never seem to actually deliver at Spurs. Even Eriksen towards the end didn't really score that many free kicks. So I think set pieces are a big part, and we seem to be signing like ready-made men sort of thing. Palini as obviously Romero, Van der Ven, that sort of stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to bring that. Don't want to go into too much negatives, but what concerns do you have with Spurs right now? And this doesn't have to be Frank related. It could just be, we are going to go on to transfers, but is there anything that kind of concerns you with Spurs right now?
Yeah, definitely. I think that like the lack of clarity around the strategy. I know we're just fans and we're sort of desperate for information, but I think that it creates this idea of a way that our transfer window is being conducted, and there's no real news. Any link that you're getting, you can probably use that as a way to chalk these guys off the list, because Johan Lang signs players that we haven't been linked with. Yep. And so when you get the link, you go, it's not going to be him. They're not going to be him. And so it's but I think that creates negative energy. I think that what the fan base concern me a little bit in just how volatile they are. It's like, sort of feast or famine. You beat Arsenal, you sign Palini, everyone's back on board, and then suddenly a couple of days later we haven't signed anybody else, and then the Bayern Munich game, and now everyone's back to meltdown mode. I think that volatility does eke into the mindset of the club, like the first team, and so you need the club to be behind. They need the energy of how the season finished. That needs to be carried over into the next season. And the way you do that is through a consistent, nice transfer window where things go your way. And I just think, whilst I can respect the art of like keeping everything close to your chest, not allowing other people to be aware of your moves, you can hear that. But as a fan base that's not given anything to really chew on, I think that then creates like this kind of volatility and this general sort of recession that can then start the season, and it can affect things on the pitch. So that's a concern. And I certainly think on the pitch, look, I think I'll probably goes without saying, without getting into the transfer stuff yet, but there's lots of areas for improvement in our squad. What I would say is I hope that the fact that Tottenham Hotspur have loaned out all these young players, which a lot of them are surprising, like some of the more senior of the youth, like the Vuskovics and those, like these guys, Jamie Donnelly's, Mikey Moores, the fact that all of them have been loaned out, none of them have been kept.
Yep.
That to me is very risky, but I would hope that there's a logic to it, and that you can be a little bit reassured that whilst we're not getting fed the information about transfers, that there's a lot of activity happening, and hopefully we'll make up the gap in that squad by getting some, 3, maybe 4 players in before the end of the window, and then giving everybody at Tottenham a chance to feel confident that we're moving in the right direction, especially if we're not buying more kids that are going to block the pathways of the guys that have gone on loan. And so you can hope, if you put all that together into one big kind of recipe, then what comes out, hopefully, is the idea that Tottenham have got money and they're going to go and buy some ready now players.
Yeah, I think that does signify that we have some sort of strategy, and some would argue that we haven't previously, but things have looked different. Kudus obviously got over the line, Palinia, even the Morgan Gibbs-White situation, that would look like we was changing the sort of strategy, so let's hope. This one has been quite interesting because the main reason this was put in was around the Son and Richie debate. Now, you don't need to go into the Richie debate because we already know where you feel with Richie, and obviously Sonny has left. Did you think that the Sonny moving on was the right decision? And then with regards to everyone else that's being mentioned, your Basumas, your Solomons, your Hills, they're all the ones that everybody's saying. I'm sure you agree with that. So
Yeah. I think that Sonny, for many reasons, right? Like, absolute legend. But towards the end there, I was starting to get frustrated seeing the way that we were force feeding him, like, here comes the big airplane, and like everything down the left hand side, and just seeing his decline. I was already starting to remember that version of him and starting to get frustrated. And then when he moved to LAFC, and then all the tribute videos came out, I got the reminder of how brilliant a player he was, and I saw like 10 years of superstar behavior, just a legend. But like, nothing lasts forever, Jack, right? Like, we're all getting older, and like, time flies, right? And suddenly you go, wow, what's that grey hair, or where's that extra curve coming from, or whatever, right? I can't quite shake off the hangover like I used to. Time waits for no man, and so you have to pick a time to sort of leave the party. Otherwise, you become the slob at the bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. That really should have gone home a long time ago.
yeah,
And I just didn't want that to happen with Sonny. I didn't want people to remember him in anything other than the legendary status that he is. So it's the right time. But as far as Tottenham go, like, if we were selling him and there's no intention to replace him because we've spent money on Matisse Tell and Odebear, and they are the guys that are supposed to take over the baton, if you like, and play, and one of them play the left wing role, and the other one learn or whatever, then that concerns me because I don't think either of them are ready. I do like, for different reasons. I think that Odebear is more of a winger. I like Matisse Tell. I think he's got bags of potential, and they're both very young, so you have to give them time to fly. But I still think that there is a need for a classy, terrifying winger that neither of those two represent yet. And so, if the plan isn't to replace him, then that's a real concern. But would I still have made, even if I knew that we weren't going to replace him, would I still have said sell Sonny anyway? I think yes, primarily because I just didn't want to see us witness the decline of a legend, and that would be the indelible memory that everyone would have by the end of it. So
Lloris is the one that sticks out in my mind.
100%.
Lloris, loyalty. He wasn't the best footballer, but he was a top class keeper. He stayed loyal. He was with us a long time. And then a lot of people now just remember that. I remember Lloris, he stuck around for a year and he was never going to be part of it, and he couldn't kick. And it was like,
Yeah,
when you look back at Sonny,
half time against Newcastle, right, and then put it back on again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so I completely agree. I think Son would have offered something in a Frank system. I think Frank would have been able to get better out of him and more out of him. However, what a time to go. Europa League champion. You take your trophy, you go, and then people will look back and be like, do you know what? Let's remember a little bit more of the good than the bad. So completely agree.
Just quickly on that one, do you think that Frank wanted Sonny to leave? Or do you think it was a club decision and a Sonny decision more than a Frank decision?
Well, from the rumours that we've heard, and it makes sense to me, is that Frank said to him, "I'd like you to stay around, but you won't be a starter. You won't be guaranteed. You'll be a player that will be involved in this squad." And Sonny was like, "I'm all right," and that makes perfect sense to me. I always said Sonny deserved to make the decision of whether he stays or goes, but Frank makes the decision whether he plays or he doesn't. That was it. That was it for me. And I think going on to Tell, I think we was on a stream when that news kind of broke, and we both said exactly the same thing. I like Tell. I know a lot of people don't. I like Tell. I like Odebear. However, they should be number twos. They should be the players coming off the bench, and they should also be the ones that are learning from the starters, like your Kudos and someone else coming in. So I wasn't against Tell coming in, but I was also the assumption that he can't be your starting winger. There should be someone else coming in. And I think that's part of the problem with Spurs in terms of selling players and bringing players in. It's okay selling these players and getting rid of players, but if we don't bring anyone in to change it or to kind of replace them, then what are we? Is there any point in actually getting rid of them? So completely agree. I have a feeling this answer might be fairly quick. Are you happy with the business so far?
Do you know what? It's surprising. I know everyone is like leaning into no. Obviously, it could be better. We could have more. But I actually think that Kudos, for what it's worth, is a proper baller and a great signing. And I think Paulinho was the guy that I was calling for the last year, or certainly the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wanted him before he went to Bayern Munich, but as soon as we were talking, I remember I was on Sabba's show and I was saying to him, like, well, we shouldn't really be spending that money on Matisse Tell right now. If they owe us money, the guy that we should go and get is Paulinho.
Yep.
And Sava and I were in agreement on that. And then from there, the kind of like the fan base started. I'm not saying not taking credit for it at all, but like the fan base started to get around that narrative as well. So everyone was sort of, or pretty much everybody. There's always some people that don't want, they want to be sort of the contradictory sort of idea, but most people were really happy with that. Most people were really happy with Kudus. Most people would have been really happy with Morgan Gibbs-White. And I don't blame the club for the Gibbs-White thing. I think that their owner has just basically said, I don't want that to happen, therefore it's not happening, and I'll do whatever I have to do. And if you look into Marinakis' past in a bunch of different areas, the guy's a bit of a dodgy guy that probably says things or does things that terrify people,
Yep.
And so, okay, I'll do what, just chill out, stop threatening me kind of thing, allegedly.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Agree. Yeah.
So I am actually happy with the business so far that we've done. We just haven't done enough of it.
That's exactly it. I think if you look at the deals in isolation, I'm not against the grain. I was very much in the Paulinho camp. Under Ange was the number one target. Under Frank, I felt if we are better defensively, maybe we could have a player that plays a little bit more. However, I was expecting that to be a £50 million deal or a £40 million deal. Now we've got him on loan. Absolutely, that's a top line. Do you know what I mean? So, and the Kudus deal, again, spoke to the West Ham fans. I live very close to that area. A lot of them were saying inconsistent, not brilliant, okay on his day, but actually has a lot of off days. I'm looking at it going, hang on, in the market of your Medwekis and what other wingers are going for, that's exactly the type of player Spurs want and need.
100%.
So I think in isolation, you're right. I think both the deals are brilliant. However, it's just whether enough of them have been done. If Morgan Gibbs-White had have been done and then we were sitting here with them 3 players,
we'd be happy.
Would the fan base be in a bit of a different situation?
You know what? I don't actually. I think the fan base is so reactionary. I think, yes, like generally speaking, there'd be a better theme right now. But I think that the narrative that I see today, the narrative I saw last night on the Spurs 5, it's just everyone's got their knives out for the football club again because they don't think that anything's happening. Because as I said in the previous answer, there's not enough of that kind of noise that's dropping, that Spurs are in discussions with this guy. And then when there's no ambition, and then when there are links to players like Rodrigo, those same people would say, don't be so ridiculous, he's never going to come to Tottenham. So I just think the fact that the fan base is infected with this, I don't know, this general lean towards like, I always want to find a reason to complain. And I understand it. I get it. Like, it's your passion and it's football. And if Tottenham are not successful enough and they're seeing other teams doing more, I get it. I totally get it. But at the same time, I think that there's always in football fandom, and this is not a Tottenham thing, this is a football thing, a human nature thing. It's a what have you done for me lately? We didn't even get a chance to really chew over and digest the Kudus deal because 24 hours later, it was the Gibbs-White deal.
Yeah.
And everyone moved immediately onto that story. And then because it didn't happen, then the next 2 weeks, with it ending badly as a story, and everyone went back into meltdown mode. Had we got Morgan Gibbs-White the second day, I still don't think we would have chewed over and digested the Kudus transfer. Then you had to wait for Paulinho. People might be a little bit more reassured, but it doesn't matter because as soon as you lose a game 4-0, even though it's a preseason friendly and it doesn't matter, well, you know what? Shouldn't have sacked Ange and Daniel Levy, you're the traitor within and all. Like, it's just the same thing over and over again, and it's just exhausting. But it is what it is. So, I'm not sure the fan base would be much happier had we got Morgan Gibbs-White because there'd still be the what have you done for me today? That was yesterday. What I want more. I want more. It's like the consumption mindset. You're never satisfied.
Yeah, but all of the deals, and obviously you mentioned it about Lange and the way that he works, all of the deals have actually come very, very quickly. So I know that Kudus we was linked with for a while. Paulinho we've been linked with since probably last season. But in terms of what fans want and what fans are talking about, but when you go to the concrete reports, they've moved very, very quickly. It was almost like, yeah, Spurs have got an eye on Paulinho. Oh, by the way, he signed. It was like, where did that come from? And then Morgan Gibbs-White was exactly the same. It was 2:00 and by 8 it was here we go. And Kudus was exactly the same. So
and Odebear last summer. And
it's
so
very frustrating
it's entirely it is, yeah, but it's entirely possible, mate. It's entirely possible that we're recording this at 1:35 on Friday, right? Yep. It's entirely possible that we might actually have another. I'm not saying it will happen, of course, but like just given the trend, by 2:00 you might suddenly get an Ornstein bomber Tottenham are interested in Paqueta, just as an
Yep.
example. And then by 8 o'clock tonight, everyone's going live talking about Paqueta coming into Tottenham. Like, these stories are not slow burns, although they probably are slow burners. Like, just quick, I feel like people assume that the Kudus story started and finished on the same day because that's what we heard of it.
Yeah.
But the chances are that Tottenham were talking with West Ham for weeks about
Yeah, of
Kudus,
course.
probably, And the Gibbs White thing, I reckon that Tottenham knew about Gibbs White's, clause months ago. And they just knew when was it able to be triggered, at what particular price point, and where they screwed up was they made it obvious that that we
Do a bit of work
we
in.
knew something we shouldn't, or whatever. But I
Yeah.
think that, like, just because we don't hear about things doesn't mean that we're not doing things. There's a
Yeah,
massive difference.
100%, completely agree. You've kind of mentioned it there, bringing up Paqueta. In terms of who Spurs should bring in, and if you've got a number one target. Now, you could just be saying, I know obviously with yourself and the content you do, you'll be knowing players exactly what they do, what they'll offer. But have you got one player in particular where you think, actually, if we can get him, it can really change?
Yeah, the obvious one is, especially given what's happened to Madison. Eze is obvious that he would unify the fan base.
Yeah.
100%, he would unify the fan base. 68 million quid. I don't even think it's that much when you see how much, people like Sesko have just gone for 85 million. Madness. And what they want for Nicholas Jackson. I know that they're different players, and they're younger and stuff, but, like, the market's bonkers. Some players seem to go for very little. Other players seem to go for massively overinflated fees where you're pricing in perfection. At £68 million for an Eze, you've got 5-6 years still left in his tank. And there might not be any sell-on value, but Tottenham need to kind of adjust their thinking about that, because you can qualify the value of the cost of the trade by looking at the amount of points that he's going to get you, and the amount of goals that he's going to get you, and what that looks like in merit points or Champions League wins and all that other campaign prize money that the absence of a player like him will not provide us. And so there's different ways that you can quantify and qualify the price, the value proposition. He would be number one. But like I say, if not him, and I don't expect, I mean, I'd love it if it was him, but if it's not him, someone in that pocket, someone in the 10 that also has the terror, that can play off the left, that can drift in the counter, in the transition, that can pick the ball up on the left-hand side and run at players, and just give the opposition a dual threat to concern themselves with. One being Kudus on the right, but he needs someone to share the workload. After that, for me, I still think the midfield needs a bit more bite, but I don't know if that's as big a priority as the 9. I think that Tottenham need a bang. Tottenham needs someone that can get in sort of 18 goals. There's very few players that score 20 goals anymore a season.
Yeah.
Luke, right? It just doesn't
Yep.
happen anymore because of the way that football's moved. But if you can get someone that's going to get you 15 to 20 in the Prem, then you're halfway there to having a really good season. So, Richarlison's not going to do it. And Solanke, I think Solanke's far better than most of the fan base does. But for me, he's probably still a little bit below the level you want. So if you could go and get someone, I think that Evan Gassan that went to Villa would have been great value, but a Mikhail Tadzi, someone like him, that most people would go, who? Don't know who he is, but I promise you, if Tottenham were to sign him, he'd solve so many problems. He's so good.
That happens a lot amongst this fan base. I mean, I see it all the time. I even go to Oliver. I'm not saying he's the star signing, but we signed him. He's relegation fodder. He come from that sort of team. So did Mane. So did Van Dijk. They come from Southampton's. So that, and then also it's like, well, why don't we do what Brighton do? Why don't we do what Bournemouth do, where they go and get these young players for a couple of million quid, and within a couple of years they're worth 60 million? It's like, well, when we do that, you then go, who's that? I don't know.
Where's the ambition?
Yeah, so you can't have it every way. I agree. I think Eze's the kind of guy that everyone's spoken about. It went quiet, and obviously with the injuries, I think Paqueta would be a great option at Spurs. Whether West Ham would do the deal, especially after Kudus, we will find out. But I think everyone is in agreement in terms of where we need to look at, especially with the Madison injury. Next two are potentially short and sweet. It depends on how you take them. But one to watch for this season doesn't necessarily mean a young player, could be an older player. Kudus has been mentioned amongst it. But is there one player that you'd like that you think might have a really good season for Spurs?
Yeah, there's lots actually. There's lots of players that I think are going to improve under Thomas Frank, that have got all of the bags of potential. They just need a bit of coaching, and that need to sort of that will benefit from the style of play. I personally do think that one of Odebear or Tell will be a standout this season. I think that Pape Sarr might end up being a surprise to the upside. And I actually think that Destiny Udogie will have or Jed Spence, whichever one he goes with. I think the left back role will be pivotal.
Yeah.
And I think that under the right coaching, Cochrane's known for sort of working closely with fullbacks more than he does. Like he's a sort of tactical master in my mind, but
Yep.
He's got a history of developing fullbacks. So I think that Pedro Porro will just continue to be a beast. I hope he doesn't get injured. But on the left hand side, I think that our left back will be a massive part, and I think that whoever it is that gets the nod, will be really improved. And will be exciting to see. But what just on the flip side of that, the one to watch that I think might be a bit of a negative, and I hate to say this, but I would be surprised if Mickey van der Ven's trajectory from what we knew of him last season versus this season. I don't think the system is going to benefit him. I think that his weaknesses will be amplified, and I think his strengths will be nullified a little bit because we're not going to play with that high line. And so what we think of Mickey van der Ven is this amazing get out of jail speed, and he's just his brilliance in that regard. Don't get me wrong. I think the guy's incredibly talented. I think he's intelligent. His football IQ is good, but I do think he lacks in areas in positional awareness.
Yeah.
Aerially, for a big guy, I don't think he's great. He can leave a gate at the between him and the centre back where tricky number nines can drift into, and he's going to have to improve because we're going to be playing a lot deeper in the Champions League, and so he's not going to be able to demonstrate his unbelievable attributes that he could under Ange. And so I'm a little bit concerned about whether or not he's going to be he might end up being a bit of a vulnerability, a bit of a weakness that teams target.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've been saying this about Van der Ven is that under the previous set of tactics, we highlighted every single good thing about his defensive work. And then this season, it's going to be slightly different. So we'll actually see how good he is as a defender. I think one-on-one, when the ball's played over the top, I've literally seen strikers just go shrink within themselves, knowing I'm up against Van der Ven. It's pointless. Yeah. But when he's come up against tricky little wingers, the goal that was scored yesterday, Coman, that sort of thing with quick feet in and around, it will be interesting to see how he adapts. So I completely agree. And actually saying about one to watch, one I've been saying about is I think Porro could be very, very good this year. I think both tactics, whether it be him coming, Udogie being the overlapping fullback and Pedro Porro coming inside, I think if you get the right left winger, the long ball, the all the viral ball is absolutely beautifully played by Porro on several occasions. And then also if he's the overlapping one, his crossing ability and his ability to be able to dictate the ball from deep again both tactics could end up being perfect for him. So I feel like he could end up being a real star in this system if we get the right players around him. So completely agree on that one. Last quick one, and then that will be followed up by the last question. Your hot take for 25-26, obviously preferably Spurs related. We've had players like Dom Solanke to get 20 league goals, top 4 finishes for Spurs. What would be your hot take?
Hot take. Matisse Tell will get more than 15 GA in this season.
I've been saying 15. I think I've been saying 15 for sure, but obviously that is dependent on whether Odobert is the guy that starts on that left wing. But yeah, completely agree. I don't think it's a hot take, but I think many people will, because I agree.
Mate, you know who I spend most of my time streaming with, right? Like obviously Johnny, Lubo, Del, Sava. These guys, there's not a positive word that comes out of their mouth about Matisse Tell. It's almost like it's amongst themselves. It's like it's not even an opinion anymore. It's a fact that Matisse Tell is terrible. I was just like, come on, what are we doing here? Jesus, don't get me wrong. I think that some people that want to look positive, maybe I'm guilty of it as well, is playing the kind of Harrods Tupperware, idea where because he came from Bayern Munich, you assume that he's good. But I just think that, what you can't teach in a human being is motivation, hard work, desire, determination, and confidence. You can't teach those things. Those things come from within. What you can teach is how to find those moments and those skill sets and develop the percentage points. And I think we have a wonderful team around him now that can do the things that he maybe lacks a little bit of in that kind of footballing IQ. But if you can get that side of him right, then all of the things that you can't teach a human, which is that motivation, the confidence, and the self-belief and dedication, he has that in more. He has more of that than I think anybody else in the football team. I think that there's, if you were to say,
doesn't he?
Yeah, he's committed. He's 100% committed. He's 100% driven, focused. He's a workhorse. And I think he's got a show pony in him. And then if you can get a workhorse that also has the show pony, then you've got a superstar. And so over to the coach and the team to get that side of him nurtured, but his nature you can't train, and it's exceptional.
Yeah, no, I say I completely agree. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say he's fantastic at this, and I just have a feeling about him that if things click, then he goes up. It's very similar to Odebear in a way that if things click for them, I think they go up the levels very, very quickly. So we could whereas some players you go, I'll give him 2-3 years and he'll develop and he'll get better. With them, I think in a couple of years, I can see them going from being what I just said, a bench option, a second option, to being these guys can proper play. Like these are proper players. So completely agree. And then the last question to round off the preview is your expectations on this season. So this is around the competition. So obviously, again, a lot of this is dependent on who you draw, etc. But what sort of expectations do you have in the league? Obviously, we've got the Super Cup first, so we'll start there.
Yeah, at the moment, I think the Super Cup's coming too soon for us. So I think we won't win it. I think it will be probably 3-0 to PSG, and then the meltdown will ensue, and then the season begins. Look, this is all pending what I expect to happen in the transfer window over the next 3 to 4 weeks. I do expect 2 or 3, maybe even 4 in a punch. More players coming in that will help.
Yep.
But my expectations for the season are pretty. I think they're reasonable. I think that the Champions League, I think we should be able to qualify between 9th and 24th. So I think we'll get into the playoff.
Yep.
And then whether we get through to the last 16 or we don't depends on what other teams who we get, basically.
You could get Madrid this year.
Yeah, exactly. If you get that, then you get your stuff. But either way, just to get to the playoffs, I think would be a decent effort.
Yep.
Outside chance if we get lucky with the draw. And when I look at the pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, and pot 4, I actually think that pot 1 is obviously difficult. Pot 2, I don't see an extraordinary amount of talent in pot 2. I think pot 3, believe it or not, is more difficult than pot 2, and we're in there. And then obviously pot 4, you should be able to get if you can avoid. And we can't get Newcastle, but Newcastle are probably the only decent team in pot 4. We can't get them, so I think that we should be able to qualify into the playoffs at least. In the cups, obviously the cups, there's so much variance, right? In the cups, like it depends who you get. If you get Manchester City or Arsenal in the second round away from home, then it's a danger zone. But I think that we can expect probably, I don't know, like somewhere around quarterfinal stage until you get into the if you get a lucky draw, a decent draw where you play a couple of Premier League teams along the way, but you don't get them like we did really well last year in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup, considering our pathway was so difficult. Mm-hmm. So I'd expect like quarterfinals on a basic variance that we get a couple of difficult teams, a couple of easier teams, whatever. Quarterfinal type stage for them, and then in the league, I guess, which is the biggest barometer, I would say if we qualify for Europe via the league, even like the Conference League, I think that's a really decent season for his first season, given what everyone else is doing. And I think that I'd say that we're probably about the 8th best squad in the Premier League. And then obviously there's luck that comes into that, right? How lucky do you get with injuries? Obviously Tottenham don't get very lucky very often. But how, refereeing decisions, fixtures, pile-ups.
When do you play them in Champions League? Who's your own home? Are you at home the next weekend? That sort of stuff. Yeah, 100%.
All of those things. And let's just say that you get average luck in all of those things. Like you win some, you lose some. I'd say that around 8th would be about where I would expect. If we finish 7th or higher, I think it's an outperformance. I think if we finish 9th or lower, it's probably a little bit disappointing or very mediocre. If we're down in like the 14th, 15th sort of levels, if it's just a marginal improvement from last season, then I think that we're really struggling, and then I think that'll be really poor.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he was asking in some group chats today about where do we think he should finish, and that's exactly what I said. If we can get some sort of European football, and in a way, I mean, obviously, if someone says you can get top 4, that's absolutely brilliant. But in terms of building, it could be that if you get a Conference League or Europa League place and then you improve that team, you could end up being challenging for them trophies, and a few trophies in a few years would be absolutely incredible. So it does work 100%. Its way around in different aspects, especially European trophies. You take them when they come along.
100%, mate. Like I've got no problem playing in the Conference League next year. Obviously, it will be damaging for our ability to spend, but the amount of money that this club generates through its commercial activities, through the non-match day events, the fact that our wage to turnover ratio is so low, there's so much room. And by the way, last thing I'll say, I know we didn't cover it in a previous answer, but the fact that Sonny's gone and that drops the wage bill by another £10 million a season, or maybe more, 12, 13, whatever. And the fact that there's nobody at the club right now that could knock on the door if we were to sign a worldie. And sometimes the consequences of signing a worldie are that then suddenly the other three worldies at your club go and knock on the door of the chairman and say, "Hey, if he's getting that, I should too."
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to happen right now. There's nobody at the club that could say, if he's getting 250, I want 250 a week.
Yeah.
Apart from the one guy that you actually really want to sign a new contract that currently won't, which is Romero. And so you can kill two birds with one stone by saying, "All right, I'll give you 250 a week, but all you got to do is sign on the dotted line. And by the way, that extends your contract by 4 years plus one."
Yeah.
And so, that's why I know that people are frustrated because it's not happening yet, or it's not appearing to be happening. But I do think there's work going on in the background. And I think that there's a perfect sort of storm of opportunity, given where we are with our wage to turnover, given that we're in the Champions League, given the holes in the squad, I'd even say that the Maddison injury is a bit of a blessing in disguise because it forces the hand and would make Daniel Levy and whoever's running the show say, I wouldn't usually think that £68 million is right money for Eze. But it's like if you have a leaky toilet at midday on a Monday, you're going to phone up a plumber and they're going to charge you 400 quid and you'll do it because you need to get the toilet fixed. But if it happens at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning or whatever, they're going to charge you £1,000. But ultimately, you're going to have to pay because needs must. It's an emergency. Yeah. And so, I think that right now, Tottenham might not see the value until the Maddison injury. They might have gone, Eze is just not worth 68 million quid. And that's a general vibe with a lot of teams, apparently, that look at Eze and say 27, 68 is too much. Well, not for Tottenham anymore because it's such an urgency thing. And I think that if Tottenham were to actually, for once, go and pay the price, there's a lot of benefits to it as well because I feel like Daniel Levy's once bitten or like 3 times bitten, 5 times shy with regards to the overspend in the past on big player signings. If you go and get him done, he will be a success at Tottenham. And then that might then rewrite Daniel Levy's own hesitancy in the future. And also, if you can create a decent relationship with Parish by paying the money and making the deal convivial and an easier transaction, then guess what? You might be able to sort of pick him off for Mark Gahey in January when Mark Gahey's only got 6 months left on his contract and Palace are desperate to get some money before losing him for free. Then maybe Daniel Levy can get ahead of Liverpool in that pursuit, maybe, or a Mateta if that was the guy we wanted, or whoever else. Right? Palace have got an Adam Wharton, for example. So there's benefits to experimenting with the idea of paying top money for a top player, and maybe you thinking you're hesitant because of previous mistakes. This won't be a mistake, and actually, it might actually bode well for the future with regards riskier trades down the track.
Yeah, he's definitely been burnt in the past, but listen, there's always negatives or there's always question marks over any deal. But I think with Eze and the deals that we've been burnt in the previously, there's a lot less unknowns. I mean, the Premier League aspect we know about. Obviously, he's been around in the Premier League for so long. You can check out, you can know exactly what this personality is like in terms of what he expects, what he does on a training pitch, etc. So again, I completely agree with you on that. It is really weird how Spurs fans take things. But I do think that if Eze was that was what I was going to say. The Danzo situation for me was the exact same situation for Maddison. Potentially, everybody said about when Dragusin got injured that we needed a centre back anyway. Then we went and got Danzo really quickly. People were going that was because Dragusin injury, not because we needed the centre back anyway. Is it a case of we wanted a 10? We weren't going to get it. Exactly what you said. Maddison's there. Could we just get away with it for another year? Well, now we don't have a choice, and now we have to go and get it. So does it push him into action? I certainly hope so. I think we definitely need it. And I think that actually by signing someone better in one of those positions will improve the impact Kudus has as well, because he's going to be less easy to mark if you've got 2 threats as opposed to just a single one.
Yeah, I completely agree, mate. 100%. Like I say, not long to go, mate, but you hope that the wheels are turning in places that we can't see, like a duck on water. All we see is the quiet, sort of placid duck that's just moving gently, but underneath the surface, you really hope that those legs are turning real super quick because time is running out. As I say, I think the PSG is probably a step too far too soon. But the league is a long one, so even if it means that we don't get a player until, or the final piece is done until towards the end of the window, towards deadline day, as long as they're here by September the 1st, I'll be okay.
Yeah. Oh, and that was the other thing I was going to say. This is also, in terms of about being patient. I know Spurs have always waited to the end of a window, but this is one of the other things about constantly chopping and changing your manager. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have done that on this basis, but when a manager comes in, he has to bring with it his own ideas. The targets may have been different. The play style is obviously different. So then he does have to come in, and it's horrible as a fan, but he does have to work out, actually, this guy might be a star for me, whereas previously he wasn't a star under X, Y, and Z. So maybe that's another part of the reason for the delay. Guys, that's the last of the questions. There is no more. We've finished the episode for Sean and Spurs Talk Show. Please make sure that you like the video and subscribe. I'm sure if you guys are watching this, you've already subscribed to Sean, but if you haven't done, please make sure you do that. Thank you very much for all the support on the channel recently. It's been absolutely insane support. We will be getting memberships coming to the channel soon, so really looking forward to that. We'll finalize a few things in the coming weeks. But other than that, last thing from me, as always, come on, you Spurs.